some of the DeMar DeRozan stuff we talked about for 6 hours yesterday and kind of try to spin it forward, because I think you and I are in the same boat, and I think a lot of people are, where this is minus the symbolic aspect of the Kings landing a player of DeMar DeRozan's stature, but just from a pure basketball standpoint, this puts them in the top 6 in the West, not a title contender, but they are closer today than they were pre-trade. Correct? We're all on the same page there.
Yeah, I think that's realistically where they are. I mean, there's a possibility they could be better than top 6. There's a possibility that they find some sort of kismet here and they take off this season and they are a title contender. But being realistic, and I think we can tell where they are. They still lack the length and athleticism on the wings that they need. They need 1 or 2 more pieces. But they've done a really, really nice job of winning the offseason so far. Like, again, if we were giving them grades, I'm giving them like a B+ right now, and that's probably more because of the injury to their rookie, to Devin Carter.
Sure.
But you save the offseason when you were able to retain Malik Monk. You took a huge step towards winning the offseason when you got DeMar DeRozan. And now, like, how do you finish it? How do you finish this last couple of weeks of sort of like the prime, offseason in the NBA?
Yeah, man. And that's where, Jason Timpf yesterday from Hoops Tonight, a great guest that we had when I was filling in on D'Lo and KC. We asked him because Sam Quinn from CBS gave the DeMar DeRozan grade a D-, a DeMar DeRozan trade a D- grade. And so I asked Jason, like, hey, what do you think? And he basically said he's not going to grade the deal until he sees how the rest of the roster kind of shakes out, which I think is fair. But that's kind of where I'm at with the Kings offseason. I think right now, for me, you say B+, and I think that there's been a lot of really high level, not necessarily high level, but a lot of moves that were necessary and needed to be made, between Mike Brown being extended, Malik Monk being re-signed. I liked the Devin Carter pick, and of course the DeMar DeRozan trade. But I think if we walk into this year going, hey, length and athleticism still a problem for this team, then I think I would have a really hard time like being super amped about how the offseason went, because so many of the problems that we talked about with Sacramento last year was because of the lack of length and the lack of athleticism on the wings. And frankly, they've gotten thinner there with Harrison Barnes leaving. So that's the one quibble I have so far. The top end moves have been really, really great, but I think right now they are going to run into a lot of the same problems they had last year.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that they've gotten rid of some of sort of the redundancy, and they did get longer at, say, the backup point guard position as soon as Devin Carter can play. And I'd even say like length and athleticism. I'm going to give DeMar DeRozan a upgrade over like a Kevin Huerter at the position. Sure. And I'd point out too, Kyle, like, look, going back and looking at all the stats, right? You want to dive into some of these stats. From what I can tell, DeMar DeRozan held his opponent to 34% shooting from the 3-point line last season. And that's really good. And Harrison Barnes allowed his opposition to shoot 41% from 3. So, yeah, maybe he's not a great defender at age 34 going on 35, but that doesn't mean that he's not better than what you had there before. Sure. And, I don't think he's as versatile. I don't think he can handle some of the bigger, stronger, small forwards in the league. But again, that's why I'll just keep saying the Kings aren't done yet. And then, we can point to like Jalen McDaniels, whether he plays a whole bunch of minutes or he doesn't. He is an upgrade over Kessler Edwards. He is long and athletic. He is that type of guy that you need, and he does have NBA experience. And so I would actually give them a little bit there as long as he actually plays. And that's always going to be the question mark, right?
You don't get a plus for adding Jalen McDaniels.
Well, we'll see.
An upgrade over Kessler Edwards, neat.
Well, no, I get that, but
I can't get there.
I could even tell you that in my opinion, like there are times where if you're going to play a Sasha Vezenkov,
Mhm.
and we talked about it doesn't have to be a better player, it just has to be a better fit, and
Sure.
I think he can potentially fill in more than what you had last year at that position as a reserve. And look, I think you just take all those minutes that potentially Chris Duarte would have got, or Sasha, or name
Mhm.
that guy that comes off the bench deep in games, and maybe you do find something there. But I'm not convinced that that's like a move that answers any major question. It's just a move, and
Sure.
but I do still think that he's a better fit, and he actually fits what you're trying to build better. Maybe he's a better support piece than what you had backing those guys up last season.
Yeah, I guess. The thing I keep coming back to is if Jaden McDaniels did not exist in the NBA, then I think that's where a lot of hype around Jalen McDaniels, or whatever, hype is probably too strong of a word, but the optimism about Jalen Daniels, I think comes from, well, look, his brother's really tall and lengthy and a really, really good defender and got paid. So why can't, maybe he'll do that? That's because I was really excited about the Jalen McDaniels idea at first, and I just kind of did a deeper dive and I was like,
He
that's
was okay 2 years
fine.
ago with the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah,
I thought he was a solid player. Whether he's a game changer or not, I'm not saying that at all.
sure.
I'm just saying that, like, if you're gonna be a playoff team, you can't look down at your bench when you have 2 starters, or your starter and your 6th man go out. You can't look down at your bench and go, "Where do I go now?" And I
Right,
think that
right.
there was a moment when that happened last year with the Kings where they had way too many redundant pieces, and you had nowhere to go. And clearly, Mike Brown had sort of lost faith in the Chris Duarte idea,
Definitely.
and and Sasha got hurt twice, rolled his ankles twice.
Hmm.
So you started to get to this moment where it's like, okay, are you going to try to force a guy like Kessler Edwards onto the court, or are you not? And I
Yeah.
think that finding a guy like Keon Ellis just ended up being a magical moment for this team. But if you hadn't
Definitely.
found Keon Ellis, just think of where this team could have gone. It would have been a lot uglier than the way it finished.
Yeah, yeah, I think I agree with you. And that's where I think, so I've been thinking about this idea of like playoffs or bust for the Kings, right?
Yeah.
And I almost don't, I know that's going to be the expectation going in. And I think that's totally fair. Even if they make zero additional moves to their roster, we see how close they were last year. I think they were a Malik Monk injury away last year. Now they've insulated themselves from that a little bit. They've upgraded certainly their offense, potentially with the numbers you just said, potentially upgraded defensively a little bit with DeMar DeRozan, believe it or not. So I I wonder, is it fair now to say like, hey, it is a failure of a season if the Kings don't make the playoffs? Or do we fall back to, well, they're not done yet? And this version of the roster is not the maximized version of the roster that they envisioned when they traded for DeMar DeRozan. There's other dominoes to fall here. The size of those dominoes, TBD. But there's additional dominoes to fall where the team we see walk out onto the court for game one is not going to be the same team we see now, as of July 9. And that's where I feel like we should be holding out a little bit on the idea of like, wow, abject failure if this team doesn't make the playoffs, because look at the moves they made and they should be there, because I think they are, I think whatever move they have coming is going to be that final piece, whether it's Kyle Kuzma or a different player. I think that's going to be the final piece that really locks in, like, okay, there it is. Like, this is for sure a team that should be a top 5 team in the West with no question, and not like a top 5 team where they're battling down to the final day. Like, they're comfortably a top 5 team ahead of the Lakers and the Clippers and the Warriors and all those teams that conceivably should be battling for a play-in spot.
Yeah, I think at this point, I feel pretty comfortable saying that they have an opportunity to be one of those teams in the top of the West.
Mm.
Like the depth, the ability to score on anybody, the ability to score in a variety of ways, whether it be
Mhm.
Sabonis in the post, Fox breaking people down off the dribble, or now DeMar DeRozan or Keegan Murray, Malik Monk. Like they have
Mhm.
so many different things that they can do, but I also will like caution. I think that there is like a missing piece here.
Yep.
You don't have the optimized version of Malik Monk is Malik Monk needs a lob threat in the pick and roll. You don't
Mm.
have that. You don't have that piece. Last year they went out and they brought in JaVale McGee to be that piece. Well, that didn't work out, but that's still the optimized version. So you still have these players that you need to go out and get. They still have some roster spots that they can go try to find these players. But I still think that they're on the right path and they're super close to having a dynamic team. And I think that when you lock in DeMar DeRozan, and now it gives you an opportunity to go try something new, try something different that maybe wasn't in your mindset before that. Because now you
Mhm.
know you got a guy who can put up 24 on any night. You got a guy who can put up 50.
Mhm.
But you now have another high level score. Now, does that mean that you can go out and maybe get a guy who's just a defensive minded
Right.
freak at the 3-4? Maybe you can.
Right. Yeah. It changes the bar for that player for sure, and the skill set necessary for that player.